Every time you say yes to the world but no to yourself, you drift further from who you are. What if the deepest kind of despair is not being alone, but being untrue to your soul? Kierkegaard believed that the hardest choice is also the holiest one, the choice to be you. There is a strange loneliness in modern life, not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of not being yourself. You can be surrounded by people, liked by many, successful by every measure, and still feel hollow inside. Why? Because you have never chosen to live as you. You have followed, you have adjusted, you have worn the masks expected of you. And slowly, without even realizing, you have moved further away from your own truth. Søren Kierkegaard saw this clearly. Long before social media, before global capitalism, before mass marketing, he warned us of the greatest danger to the soul, the loss of self through the crowd. Kierkegaard lived in 19th century Denmark, but his thought feels uncannily modern. He saw a society becoming more comfortable, more rational, more organized, and more empty. In his view, the problem was not material lack but spiritual avoidance. People did not suffer from too little comfort, but from too little courage to face themselves. The crowd, he wrote, is untruth, not because people in crowds are evil, but because when we blend into the collective, we lose our responsibility, we outsource our thinking, we delay our becoming. We say, they said, everyone thinks, that is how it is. And we stop asking the most important question: what do I think? Who am I really? What life do I want to live? For Kierkegaard, truth is not abstract, it is not a formula. It is lived, and it is always personal. You cannot find it in systems or ideologies. You must find it in yourself. But this journey is hard. It begins with despair, not the dramatic kind, but a subtle ache, a sense that something is off, that even in success, you feel misplaced. This despair, Kierkegaard says, is the sickness unto death, not of the body, but of the spirit. It is the quiet torment of living as someone else, of not claiming your true identity, of fearing the responsibility of being you. Yet, paradoxically, this despair is also a gift, because only through despair do you awaken. Only when you admit the gap between your outer life and your inner self can you begin the path toward authenticity. Kierkegaard does not offer easy comfort. He offers a mirror. He says, stand alone, think deeply, choose yourself. This is not narcissism. It is not self-absorption. It is self-acceptance. It is the beginning of a life lived from within, not dictated from without. He warns us about the temptation to live aesthetically. That is, to live for pleasure, for beauty, for performance, to treat life like a series of roles, a stage on which we perform. This aesthetic life may look charming. It may even feel exciting, but eventually, it collapses into despair, because without deeper grounding, without meaning rooted in truth, all pleasure becomes hollow. The aesthetic life avoids suffering. but in doing so, it avoids transformation. To move beyond it, Kierkegaard invites us into the ethical life. This is the life of choice, of responsibility, of becoming. It is not about following rules, but about answering the inner call, about living in alignment with your soul, even when it is hard, even when it costs you. Because the greatest tragedy, he believed, was not to fail, but to succeed at being someone you are not. In every moment, you are choosing, not just what to do, but who to be. Kierkegaard reminds us that the self is not something given. It is something created, through decisions, through struggle, through the refusal to live inauthentically. You do not find yourself by waiting. You become yourself by choosing. For Kierkegaard, the greatest choices in life are not made with full certainty. They are made with full presence. He believed that the most important decisions do not come from logic alone, but from a deeper place, a place where reason meets risk, where clarity meets vulnerability. This is what he called the leap of faith, and it does not belong only to religion. It belongs to existence itself. Every time you choose to be true to yourself without knowing the outcome, you are leaping. Every time you say yes to growth even when you are afraid, you are leaping. Every time you act from authenticity rather than approval, you are leaping. Kierkegaard understood that modern people fear uncertainty more than anything. We want guarantees. We want control. We want to know that if we choose a path, it will succeed. It will be praised. It will not hurt. But life offers no such promises. And that is not a flaw. That is the design. Because without uncertainty, there is no courage. Without risk, there is no real selfhood. When you try to plan every detail, avoid all pain, and eliminate every doubt, you do not become stronger. You become smaller. You become a copy of someone else's blueprint, a servant of someone else's fear. The leap of faith is not a reckless jump. It is a conscious act of trust. Trust not in external success, but in the worth of your own becoming. Kierkegaard does not ask you to jump into nothing. He asks you to jump into yourself, into your responsibility, into your freedom, into a life that reflects not the noise of the world, but the whisper of your soul. He knew this leap would not be easy. He wrote under pseudonyms, not to confuse, but to show that the self is a process, not a fixed thing. He understood that identity unfolds through tension, through paradox, through inner dialogue. To live deeply is to live in layers. And the leap is not one moment. It is a way of being. It is the willingness to say, I do not know what comes next, but I know that if I betray myself, I will never find peace. This leap is different for each person. For one, it may be leaving a job that suffocates their spirit. For another, it may be speaking a truth that has been buried for years. For someone else, it may be letting go of an identity that once felt safe but now feels false. The point is not what you leap from, but what you leap toward. Toward alignment, toward wholeness, toward the quiet dignity of choosing what is real. Kierkegaard warns us about the despair of never choosing. He says that when we stay in indecision, we are not avoiding pain, we are creating it. When you refuse to choose, life chooses for you, and often, what is chosen is not truth, but convenience, not depth, but ease, not joy, but numbness. Sooner or later, this passivity turns into despair, because the soul cannot thrive on safety alone. It needs meaning, and meaning comes through commitment. The leap of faith is the beginning of that commitment. It is not about controlling the future. It is about stepping into your life with intention, not as a passive observer, but as a creator, not as a shadow of someone else's values, but as a person who dares to live by their own. In the end, Kierkegaard teaches us that it is not the magnitude of your success that defines your life. It is the honesty of your choice. Were you awake? Were you sincere? Did you move from fear or from truth? These are the questions that matter. These are the choices that shape a self. To become yourself is not a single moment of insight. It is a lifelong practice. Kierkegaard understood that real change is slow, interior, and often invisible to others. It does not always look like rebellion. Sometimes, it looks like silence. Sometimes, it looks like walking away from what everyone else admires. Sometimes, it means making peace with being misunderstood. Because the truth is, living authentically will cost you something. But living inauthentically will cost you everything. To live true to yourself means letting go of comparison. Kierkegaard warned that the crowd does not only live outside us. It lives in our minds. It speaks in the voice that says you are behind. You are not enough. You must prove yourself. But the self does not need to be compared to grow. It needs to be nurtured. To become yourself, you must leave the false urgency of others' timelines and walk the slower, quieter, more sacred path of your own becoming. Living authentically also means embracing contradiction. Kierkegaard's writings are filled with paradox because he understood that the self is not linear. You can be brave and afraid. You can feel despair and still act with hope. You can feel lost and still take the next step forward. The authentic life is not clean. It is human. It is honest. It allows doubt without shame, longing without rushing, faith without proof. And yet, despite all its tension, the authentic life carries a deep kind of peace. Not the peace of ease, but the peace of alignment. You know when your words match your values, when your relationships reflect your truth, when your work expresses what you care about. You do not need applause. You do not need to be liked by everyone. You need to be known by yourself. You need to trust your own yes, and your own no. This way of life does not lead to perfection, but it leads to presence. It leads to depth. You begin to engage with your days not as someone rushing toward a goal, but as someone walking with awareness. You listen more closely. You speak more honestly. You feel more deeply. You make fewer promises, but keep more of them. You do not need to control others. You only need to remain rooted in your center. Kierkegaard believed that the self is a task, not something found, but something forged. It is forged in the quiet moments when you tell the truth no one asked for. When you choose integrity over popularity. When you walk away from comfort towards something more difficult, but more real. You are not born finished. You are born capable of becoming. And every time you choose your truth over your fear, you step closer to the person only you can be. Thank you for joining this reflection on Kierkegaard's wisdom. His voice still speaks today because the choice he invites us to make is eternal. The choice to live, not as a copy, but as a calling. The choice to take responsibility for your soul. The choice to create a life that whispers gently, quietly, but powerfully, "I am my own." If this message stirred something in you, let it grow. You do not need to change everything at once. You only need to begin with one honest choice, one silent leap, one small act of saying yes to who you truly are. If you wish to continue exploring a life of meaning, depth, and personal truth, we welcome you here at the Life Philosophy channel. This is where thought becomes practice, where reflection becomes courage, and where you walk, not toward who you should be, but toward who you already are beneath the noise. Until next time, stay awake, stay sincere, and above all, stay true.